Well, as you can imagine, we spent a good deal of time discussing the ongoing border negotiations. The American people expect us to do something about this problem, and we're working hard on a bipartisan basis to try to come up with a piece of legislation that will actually help begin to solve this crisis at the border. But I don't want to lose track of what the rest of the supplemental is about. I mean, the world is basically at war. I won't risk the entire list, but you're familiar with the attacks by the Iranians themselves on our troops in Iraq and Syria. The Houthis exchange has been ratcheted up. Then we had already the war in Israel and the war in Ukraine. This is a situation that cries out for American leadership, not only protecting our own border, but helping our allies abroad, because our enemies are on the assault in a variety of different ways, either directly or through their proxies.
Well, there's a lot of new polling out there as recently as this week that shows that the number one issue now for the American people is our border. It surpassed even inflation as the issue people care most about. And people all across the country are saying that Congress, Democrats and Republicans, ought to work with the President to try and put in place new, strong, meaningful and serious and real border policy. And that's exactly what we intend to do. We've talked about this a lot in the past. There are a lot of national security threats our country faces around the world, but we have to deal with the national security threat that exists at our southern border. People have been flocking across there now, literally through the entire Biden administration. The Biden administration has turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to what's happening down there. People can see it with their own eyes. It is an incredible crisis with consequences that go way beyond just the immediate. These are national security implications associated with what's happening at our southern border and the fact that we are consistently dealing with threats coming across that border that put the American people at risk. So it's got to be fixed. And as I said, James Lankford's leading the effort among Senate Republicans on this. Right now, the Biden administration's principal policy when it comes to the border has been catch and release. We want to codify a policy that is detain and deport, a very distinct difference. And these are tools that will be available not just today, but for future administrations and future presidents. The next president on day one would have these tools available at their disposal to get operational control, maintain operational control of the southern border. But it's got to start somewhere, and it needs to start with strong, meaningful, real, serious, and enforceable policies at our southern border.
Americans are asking themselves now, 3 years into Joe Biden's presidency, am I better off now than I was 3 years ago? Resoundingly, the answer is no. People are worse off in terms of their economic and financial security. We're worse off in terms of border security. Worse off in terms of national security, and it's Joe Biden and the Democrats who have caused these problems. Right from the beginning, Joe Biden reversed successful policies that helped secure the border. And a result of those actions, we have now had 8.8 million illegal immigrants coming into this country. Cities are being overrun. People cannot keep up with what's happening in the communities. Mayors are protesting. Additionally, a short time after that, Biden and the Democrats passed a massive $1 trillion reckless spending bill. This triggered the worst inflation in 40 years, for which American people are still suffering the painful high prices every time they go to the grocery store. And then we all remember the deadly and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And as a result of that, Russia, China, Iran no longer fear us. The American people need a commander-in-chief who stands strong, not one who continues to back down. So for these reasons and so many others, the American people know they are worse off now than they were 3 years ago. Joe Biden and the Democrats have squandered the best economy in our lifetimes. They have surrendered our southern border to the cartels and the drug dealers and the terrorist suspects. And they have empowered our enemies to commit acts of ruthless violence. Under any criteria, Joe Biden and the Democrats have made our nation worse as a result of their leadership, and Republicans are committed to putting America back on track.
Well, folks, imagine if one of your coworkers was skipping out and not even your boss noticed, okay? So it should be obvious, right? You would notice that coworker gone. Unless maybe the absent employee is the head of a government agency. So, folks, the Secretary of Defense went AWOL for 4 days. 4 days. His boss, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, did not even notice. He was absent. Biden's GSA administrator spent most of the year overseeing the full office reentry from Missouri. The Transportation Secretary, Secretary Buttigieg, went offline during a nationwide supply chain crisis. These are just a few examples. Biden is setting this example for how Washington actually works from home. He was out of the Oval Office last year more than any other modern president. Out-of-office bounce-backs by the Biden administration officials won't repeal attacks from our enemies, folks. We got to get back to work. So I'm calling on the White House OMB to audit and post every agency head's schedule. Yes, agency heads, we want to know what you're doing and where you're working from. Taxpayers deserve to know who is showing up to work and who is not. Let's know where our taxpayer dollars are going. Are they working for us or are they on vacation?
Good afternoon to everybody. I was very happy to see that children were sledding on the Capitol lawn, something I worked on several years ago, and so a lot of happy faces there on the Capitol lawn. I want to talk about appropriations briefly. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. Seriously frustrated. Here we are again, repeating theme. Last week, same thing. We're not doing these appropriations bills. We have an extension until March, so wouldn't you think that would be the time that Senator Schumer would put our bills up onto the Senate floor? It's not happening. 6 months ago, this Friday, we will have passed out of committee every single bill, and yet, except for the 3 we passed in, I believe, late October, early November, no action, crickets by the leadership here. We've also spent in the last, Senator Schmidt gave me this talking point, in the last 13 months, we've only spent 8 hours on appropriations. This is a major responsibility for the Senate and the House and the President to get this right every year. We are now 6 months behind. And it's very, very difficult for the American public to understand why. And I lay it at the feet of our Senate leader. He will not bring these bills up to the floor. Just Monday, I spent time at West Virginia University with Senator Bozeman, who's the ranking member on agriculture. He's been doing roundtables over 20 different states on the Farm Bill. Here's another major piece of legislation that's coming before us that impacts food supply, nutrition, our ag community, many, 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 many jobs all across this country. And yet, we're in another extension. So I want to thank Senator Bozeman for coming to talk about an important part of the American economy, something that I think sometimes gets taken for granted in certain parts of the country, and even in a small state like mine. It's a big economic driver. Agriculture employs a lot of people, feeds a lot of people, and we learned a lot about the research and development that's been going on at our educational institutions. So I want to thank Senator Bozeman for that, and I look forward to having a better fate of the Farm Bill than what the leader, Senator Schumer, has moved forward on not addressing our appropriations bills.
The American people know that if you head to the airport, you want to jump on a flight here in the United States, you bring a valid form of ID. I always use my Montana driver's license. I imagine some of you, maybe it's even happened to yourself, you show up at the airport, you run a little late, might have forgotten an ID back home. You don't try to enter through TSA to get to the terminal because you know you'll be turned back without a valid form of ID. This is an actual sign that's popped up at the Delta terminal at the Miami airport. Instructions for illegals to use their CBP One app, that's the Customs Border Patrol app, at TSA checkpoints as a valid form of ID to board a plane in the United States. For those who don't know, the CBP One app provides appointments for migrants who are claiming asylum at the border. Migrants, particularly those wanted for crimes, can fill in any basic information they want in the app and be let into the country. The goal is to, and I quote, validate adult non-U.S. citizen travel documentation when the traveler does not otherwise have an acceptable form of identification. However, it also notes that photos are optional. It says that multiple times. It says it can provide biographical information if requested, but notes that information is not stored, again, multiple times. How is this even serious? Illegals coming to the United States from countries that are designated state sponsors of terror and on terror watch lists can use this process. Americans, think about this for a moment. We, as Americans, are going to be forced to acquire a real ID by May of 2025, or you, or anybody else here, myself, will be barred from boarding a flight in the United States. How in the world can we justify this when illegal immigrants are allowed to board planes with unverifiable information they filled out on an app? The administration, the Senate Democrats say they are concerned about the southern border, but their actions prove otherwise. It's time to get serious.
Good afternoon. I know you've had your problems with former President Trump here, but if he continues to do well in the primaries and more Republican members of Congress continue to endorse him, will that appear strange if you, the top Republican in the Senate, are not endorsing him for president?
Well, I don't have any announcement to make on the presidential election. In fact, you all may recall I've stayed essentially out of it, and when I change my mind about that, I'll let you know.
With election year politics heating up, at what point does this Ukraine border package have to get done before it gets subsumed by election year politicking?
Months ago. Obviously, I think you already know how strongly I feel about the international challenges that we have and our need to address them. I also feel that way about our southern border. We are working hard, continuously, to try to get a solution on the border part of it. I think this is the ideal time to do it. I think all of you know the politics around here. If this were not divided government, we wouldn't have an opportunity to do anything about the border. In fact, I don't think we'd get 60 votes for any border plan if we had a fully Republican government. So this is a unique opportunity where divided government has given us an opportunity to get an outcome. Virtually all of my members have said to their constituents for a long time, we need to fix the border. This administration is not going to do it unless we force them to, and we're going to continue to press to try to get an outcome that we can put on the floor, that the majority leader can put on the floor in connection with all of these other problems that need to be addressed by the #1 country in the world who elects its own leaderships.
Leader McConnell, just to follow up, do you feel you need to mend your relationship with the former president if he wins the nomination?
I don't have any news to make today. We're all watching New Hampshire with great interest.
Leader McConnell,